Confession of the teenager who killed his parents after having read a book. It was 2003. Roman Mykolaievich Makamelo, whom I baptized, was a head of health care in the city of Kiev. And thanks to God's grace and our friendship with the namesake Roman and his influence on the main doctors of the city of Kiev, 40 temples were opened at the hospital of the city of Kiev. Some are in the separate adopted rooms on the territory, and others are in hospital buildings. It was golden time. In terms of honor and responsibility of service, a doctor stands before God in the second place after the service of the priest. The doctors cooperated with the clergy. They even invited them to their departments to consecrate them. So I visited the city psychoneurological dispensary, which is located outside the city in the village of Livacha. The chief doctor at that time was Halina Ivanovna. It was a large garden in the territory of the hospital, where the Sisters of Mercy of our temple and I erected a cross. It is interesting that the garden did not bear fruit for 15 years, and in that year, when a large cross was placed in the middle of it, the garden blossomed wonderfully, and in the fall it gave a very rich harvest. It was a big surprise for the chief doctor. The whole hospital talked about the miracle. After having blessed the cross, I blessed each building in the hospital. When it came to a separate hospital building which was behind the barbed wire, with towers and under military guard, where forced treatment was carried out on those citizens who committed serious crimes in a state of mental disorder, I was told that in one of the cells there was a teenager who killed his father and mother with a knife. It was hard to understand, but it was a fact that was written about in Kiev newspapers and that time without internet. I was imbued with pastoral responsibility. I felt that I could not pass by such a person, and if possible this child, because he is a 15-year-old teenager, even though he still has some common sense, I need to go to know him and tell him to confess. I asked the head of the department to visit the cell with the sick teenager criminal, and not only to bless the cell, but also to confess him. I was allowed to do that without objections. And so I entered the cell, and I was met by an ordinary short-cut 15-year-old boy indeed. There was nothing demonic, evil, or sadistic about his appearance. Correct facial features, not a gloomy look. He was neither surprised nor frightened. Rather, most that remarks were about me. But when I sat down next to him in a small room with a bed and a table, I was reassured by his calmness, which I didn't expect it to meet. Because after the crime announced by the doctors, I got the impression of a devil with horns. So I started the conversation. My friends, by telling the incident, I am not breaking any confessional crypt. First of all, I do not mention the name of the patient or the exact time. Moreover, the details of the crime and the motive at that time were known by both investigators and journalists. Well, I introduced myself to the boy, who was very polite, and I asked him to tell how it happened that he committed such a great sin. And would he like to ask God for forgiveness or his dead parents through my prayers? The young man did not just agree for the conversation. I didn't even expect that. He was just waiting for it. And this is what he told me. My father was a famous athlete. In my childhood, he often took my mother and me on his trips abroad. My childhood was cloudless and happy. My parents bought me such toys and clothes that all my classmates envied me. But it did not last long. When I was 10 years old, my father suffered a sport injury. He spent half a year in hospitals, he did not return to sport, and could not get any job. I remember how he began to sell his cups and medals, and how he came back home drunk, and my mother made a scandal for him. They quarreled in the kitchen so that plates crashed. The scream was such that neighbors called the police more than once. But when it found by my father's name that he was a famous athlete, it was always lenient and did not take any measures. My financial condition also impoverished. My parents were unable to buy me something new, and at school my classmates looked at me with disdain and contempt. My father drank almost every day, and my mother started drinking with him. Just then I ran away from home and wandered around the city, rode the subway, and started stealing sweets from stores. Once in the subway on Leo Tolstoy Square station, I saw a book on the counter which attracted my attention with its shiny cover. The book was called Practical Magic by Brandy Williams. Something told me to steal it. And when the seller turned away, I took it and ran fast as I could. And I could run very well. I started reading this book that night. It captured me. I wanted to be strong and to succeed in life. The described rituals on attraction of success and money and friends seemed to me a golden key to material happiness, which I wanted so much to return to me and my parents. One day, when my parents were once again arguing, throwing dashes and threatening each other after drinking, I had a vivid thought. Take the knife and kill them. I jumped, because the impression immediately scrolled in my mind the action of mine, how to do it. I pushed the thought away, assured myself that I would never do such a thing in the world. But a few days later, during the parents' quarrel, this thought reappeared, but more vividly, so that my heart hurt. I drove it away again. But later the thought and imagination began to come more often and tormented me so much that I clenched my teeth and ran away so as not to do anything bad to my parents. Moreover, I continued to read and practice magical rituals from the book, but I did not connect my obsessive thoughts with the book. I could not share my thoughts with anyone. I tried to deal with them myself, but the thoughts were so painful, so persistent, they kept nagging and nagging. It seemed, just do it and you will feel better. And that evening, when my father came back drunk again, and he and my mother got into a drunken fight, I heard a voice inside me, do it, you are strong, you can do it. My heart hurt, I stopped resisting. I do not remember how I ran into the room, took a knife, and began to inflict fatal blows on them. I woke up only in the corridor, covered in blood and already without a knife. Neighbors rushed to the inhuman screams, called police. And then there was an investigation, psychiatrists, court, and now I have been here for half a year on forced treatment. I listened to the teenager and looked at the floor. It was scary to hear, but I didn't see a criminal in front of me. I saw a victim of post-Sovietism, when just on the streets, on the counters, the literature of Hell's Day, Magic, Sex, Occultism by Blavatsky and Rerichs were blown out, not without hell. How many young people got drunk on this scum and damaged their souls? And here in front of me is a victim of dark forces that took advantage of the misfortune and ignorance of the family. Demons got into his mind and took over it. and he could not oppose them in any way. If a priest or a fellow believer were with him, to whom these terrible thoughts could be confessed, they would instantly lose their power, for demons are afraid of the light. The power of a demon over a person is due to the obsessive thoughts, pressure, which person perceives as his own thinking. And if they are sincerely revealed during confession or in a conversation with a priest, the soul becomes free. And reading occult literature contains the spirits of dark forces. A person who touches them, even if with innocent curiosity, loses God's protection. God's protection is what we call grace. The boy, as if interrupting my sad thoughts, jumped and said, "I'm already reading the New Testament. I have already read it several times." And he reached out the shelf. He gave me the Gospel in Ukrainian. It was one of the first domestic publications at that time. I kissed the book and opened it. And I read aloud the words of Jesus Christ that caught my eye. "I'm the door. Whoever enters through me will be saved." And read below, "I came that they might have life and have it abundantly."